Welcome to Innovating Clinical Trials, the podcast designed for clinical research professionals eager to deepen their understanding of clinical trials through concise, insightful segments. Join your hosts, Liam Eves and Ted Traffer, as they uncover the core issues in clinical research, reflect on the industry, and challenge conventional wisdom.
Hello, sir. How are we?
Good morning, Liam. I'm doing great. How are you?
I am good. It's actually a surprisingly nice day. I know we always talk about the weather. I should probably think of a better answer, shouldn't I?
Yeah, we need better topics. Not politics. We're not going to talk about politics on this podcast. That is forbidden. We actually have an AI program running in the background. If anyone mentions anything political, it automatically removes it.
Yeah, and zaps the person who says it.
Yeah, that's right. You get a shock.
It's a dog collar.
Yeah, that's right.
Electric dog
We
collar.
really got to start doing video. Yeah.
Yeah, there'll be some entertainment value there.
Yeah. Awesome.
Oh, dear.
I was thinking yesterday, and I'm going to go on a bit of a rant today.
Oh,
But to start with, I wanted to just talk about, have you ever been lost in a maze? Like, have you ever gone into a hedge maze or anything like that?
for sure. Like weeks it took them to recover me.
Oh, yeah. You were huddled in a corner in the field.
Yeah, I was, just crying. I just had raw corn to keep me alive.
To keep you alive. Little fire going in the middle. People wandering around looking at you, wondering what you're doing.
So, yeah, he's broken. He's just a broken man.
Yeah. So I was thinking about this, and there was this farm we used to go to every fall, and they had this corn maze, and the corn was like 7 feet high, so you couldn't see over it, and they'd cut paths through the corn to make a maze, and we'd navigate amongst the rows of the corn, and you'd be going along a path, and you come to this juncture, and you have to decide which way to go.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it was simple. You just went either left or right, and if you went the wrong way, you quickly ended up in a dead end, and you had to retrace your steps. But other times the path you took would lead to other junctions, and you'd only discover after a while that none of those decisions were correct, and you'd have to find your way back to where you started, where you made the wrong choice, and go the other direction. And then the worst scenario was you get to a junction and it's multiple choices. So it's not just two choices. You might have three, or often in the very middle of the maze, there was this little opening, and there might be 8 exits. And only one path would really lead you to the exit, but you spent a lot of time running around if you chose the wrong path. Yeah. And so what I was thinking about yesterday was the eligibility criteria for clinical trials is a lot like putting candidates and sites through a maze like this. And it would be really straightforward if you're going through the eligibility criteria and each item was a clear yes or no answer, and you could progress quickly through the list. But unfortunately, a lot of the criteria are actually really poorly written. Yeah. And a lot of times the people writing them don't understand the nuances of the statements that they're making and the impact that how an item is phrased is going to perhaps require an individual to interpret what it should mean. And that's not the way inclusion or exclusion criteria should be. It should be simple statement where the answer is crystal clear. And I don't know if you've come across this or experienced this with clinical trial protocols, but yesterday I was reviewing one and I just was shaking my head with the problems I was seeing with the list.
It's crazy. I love the statements of things. A patient must be clinically stable. Okay, exactly what
does that mean?
What does that mean? What does that mean? I think they're pretty stable. And then you've got some, but it's really interesting because it's, as you say, is that there's these black and white, and then there's this gray, and it's inside that gray where trials are honestly won or lost. Because if you have, let's just pretend it's 40% clear, entry can go in, 40% completely clear that they can't, and then you've got 20% that aren't, that could go either way. It becomes very much the individual how they are perceiving and reading into that thing that can swing either way. No one's right or wrong. It's just gray. So you can get the same,
and that's where we run into trouble.
Exactly, and you can see the same problem. You can see the same patient, and I've done it before in the past, where you'll take it to one doc and say, okay, can you, and then you take it to another, and they'll interpret it a completely different way. Oh yeah, it's fine, and it's like the other one's saying it's absolutely not. Let's have a conversation about those things. How do you think about getting around that, Ted? Have you found any like good measures to?
So I think that there needs to be a lot better review. Like the eligibility criteria are really the cornerstone of the protocol. Who's going to be the candidate that qualifies for this study? And sometimes a portion of the eligibility criteria is what's required by regulators.
Mm-hmm.
And often we'll have a sponsor say, oh, the regulator required us to have this in there. But often I find there's a lot of nuance. So yes, the regulator wants this accounted for, but how you phrase it can make the difference between whether it's clear to the investigator or the staff member who's reviewing, or whether it's not. And most commonly what I find where they start to fall apart is what documentation is acceptable for that criterion, and what is the time frame that applies. And I see this really frequently applied to ambiguity surrounding like the diagnosis. So for some diseases or disorders, the diagnosis is connected to a lab test or a biopsy result. But others, it's signs and symptoms. And how you phrase that particular item can mean a huge difference. So for example, if we're to say that they need to be diagnosed at least 12 months prior to screening, as defined by certain criteria that is only really used in clinical trials and not in clinical practice. And so then if I was to take that at face value, then I've got to go back and I've got to find in medical records somewhere that this participant was diagnosed according to that criteria over 12 months ago. And that may not be what the pharmaceutical company or biotech company intended, but they didn't phrase it correctly. And as a result, they're going to end up with problems. And they may have gotten away with it in, phase 1 and phase 2. But when it comes to phase 3, the regulators are going to go through this with the investigative site, and they're going to question the investigator to say, show me the documentation that shows that this person was diagnosed according to this criteria at least this period of time. And that's where it can really fall apart, and you don't want it to fall apart after you're done your phase 3 program.
No. And it's also interesting because to your point is that there's this real sort of paradoxical situation with healthcare and research, like you say, is that we want really specific knowledge around that entry criteria, and yet in some healthcare systems that just may not be recorded as a thing, or it's just like, I don't know about you, but certainly like in the UK, the GPs only have allotted around 6-7 minutes to see a patient, and it's like, are they really going to like log down all the information around? I've got so many diseases on there, and I've never even been seeing about some of the things that I've seen leaked up. So I'm looking at my medical chart. I did this as an experiment. I was looking at my medical chart to try and understand what is the process for like documenting and logging some of these things. Now, when I go on, I see that I've got like a diagnosis of asthma, I think it was, which I've never had asthma, but it's there. So in one way, I would fulfill the criteria but in the other way, I don't have asthma.
Right.
So I'm a perfect patient because I'm healthy otherwise.
Yeah, you're otherwise healthy. So this is ideal.
Apart from my fake asthma, I'm completely great. But I think it's a really sort of like, because there's, as you say, there's like the wording, there's almost like different categories, right, of complexities within the inclusion exclusion criteria, which are things like does it align to healthcare? How is it worded? How are there's like general statements for very specific statements, and then they become like, it's not explicit. So for instance, you might have something like no anticoagulation medication permitted, and then later you might say something like low dose aspirin allowed and things like that, but they're far away from each other in the actual protocol. Or you've got something around like, oh, no particular cancer, like patients treated with stable brain metastases are eligible. And then later in an exclusion, it's saying any history of CNS metastases is excluded. And so it's like, sometimes I think that you've got to be so thorough around these things. But then when we start to overlay, say, technologies about surfacing patients or assessing patients prior to them attending a clinic for a screening visit, is AI gets massively confused about these things because they're not logical,
right,
in how they're positioned. And then, like you say, that there's like this grayness of like, what does that actually mean? Stable, clinically relevant.
Yeah, and like there's just so many problems with, so we see run-on sentences that make it difficult to determine what statement in that big run-on sentence goes with what portion. So it's very confusing.
Yeah.
We've got extra information in the eligibility criteria that doesn't make sense, shouldn't be there. So for example, I saw one that said, provide written informed consent to participate in the study and follow the study procedures.
Yeah.
Well, what does that mean? Yes, I understand. Provide written informed consent to participate in the study. There should be a period there, and there shouldn't be and follow study procedures. That doesn't even make any sense. And then we run into other items where, again, it's not clear. And sometimes all that's needed is a statement added that says, as determined by the investigator.
Yeah.
Because then it tells you, okay, this is something we don't necessarily need to find in the medical record.
But
it's something that the investigator can document that they've determined.
Yeah.
And that's clear.
Yeah. So I think it's, to your point, is like that. It's that clarity of. It'd be almost interesting that there must be other. It's almost like marketing as something, or copywriters, that when they're writing copy to try and get points across, it's almost like, do you actually have someone that's got some medical knowledge to review it and actually just, put their sort of hat on to say, I don't understand what this means. It doesn't necessarily need to be about the clinical like conditions and things like that, or there's particular AST, ALT values and things like that. But I think it's like, just, is this sentence clear enough that someone is going to understand it?
Right. We need to remember that on the flip side, down the road, a regulatory inspector may have no knowledge of the disease or disorder being studied. And the eligibility criteria statement should be so clear that even somebody who doesn't understand the disease can determine what's required.
Yeah, exactly.
To meet that.
Yeah.
So I have two other really quick things about eligibility criteria that before we go.
Yeah, go.
One is, I think we should evaluate how we order them. And we should maybe look at what are the most likely exclusion criteria and maybe have them more towards the top.
Yeah, like that.
So that we could very quickly get to, this particular candidate doesn't qualify, and we can let them go without having to do more.
Yeah.
And the other thing was, I was thinking about the budget for the site budget, for the line item for review, inclusion, exclusion criteria. The amount of time that it takes to go through and do all these things and assess everyone and document appropriately And the amount that we set as that budget item is so ridiculously low for the skill and the importance of what we have to do. It's almost like it's been added as an afterthought, and the number we assigned to it 20 years ago is still the number that we're using. But man, when we have to go through 55 eligibility criteria, things need to change from as far as a budget standpoint goes.
Well, I think I call it the iceberg problem, because it's like everyone just sort of sees the tip of the iceberg right above the water and go, oh, well, the patient's in the study, now the real work begins. And the reality is that you've probably had to do just as much processing for those 10 patients that have enrolled into that particular site prior to those 10 patients going into it, because as you say, the number of like medical records, patient records that you're lifting, reviewing, the time taken, understanding like the clarity of, like you say, the discussion points around, is this patient suitable, should we bring them in, and so on and so forth. I think that we fail to recognize that the size of effort and work prior to entry is huge, and it's not, it isn't paid enough, to your point. And it's actually, that again is another area where you win or lose, because if you're just paying the sites for the work and the time that is needed on these particular this sort of the pre-work, shall we say, you'll be beating all other competition just as a function of you paying them for the work that they're actually doing.
And they'll focus more time on it. So thanks for digging into this with me today. We have to do better. We have to become better at writing these things and really prioritizing them, because they're absolutely critical to the success of the study.
Absolutely. And I think like another one last thing around the sites, what the sites can do is that sort of like double, for those individuals that it's like a no-brainer, right, that they are not suitable. But those individuals where there is grayness, it's like I always used to encourage our docs to have a discussion amongst yourself and review it as a team. Don't think it's just on your head, because the concern is with a lot of the doctors, right, is understandably is that, well, I don't want to be putting a patient in that's not suitable, and nor does anyone. But chat with other people, because you may just be a bit too concerned, and like having a few, a bit of a sounding board where you can actually rationalize some of these things. And it may be just a misunderstanding of how it's worded, to our earlier points. It can be, and
don't be afraid to reach out to the medical monitor.
Exactly.
That's what they're there for.
Exactly.
But make sure that if you do, that you get the direction in writing.
Yes, absolutely. And circulate that far and wide.
That's right.
Cool. That was a good topic. Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Liam. Yeah, great chatting with you again.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.